Welcome to the Boardroom Sessions podcast. In these sessions, we meet the most amazing and interesting people. We learn about their passions, their business models, cool new technologies, and of course, their lessons on personal growth. I hope you enjoy. In this Boardroom Sessions podcast, we meet Tyson McDowell. He's a serial entrepreneur, a developer, an AI crusader. He has a popular TED Talk out where they talk about the social dilemmas of AI. And we get fairly nerdy pretty quickly here into some business applications and promises around AI. He gives tech advice for folks on how they can help their careers. We dive into healthcare, nutrition, and AI, as well as talk about the overall challenges and promise of AI, both as consumers and in the business that we all live and work in. Hope you like it. Tyson McDowell, welcome to the Boardroom Sessions podcast.
Hey, thanks a lot, Mike Miller. Welcome to the Boardroom Sessions podcast.
I'm super excited to have you here. Hey, Tyson, I got introduced to you by your wife, and she said you were a cool guy that might have some good content. And little did I know from a couple conversations with you and some TED Talks and some YouTube videos that are out there that you're all of that and a bag of chips. So I'm super excited to meet you here and introduce to all of my listeners. So let me do the descriptor. You're a serial entrepreneur, a developer, and I would consider you an AI crusader.
Yeah, those are pretty accurate. These days people throw in venture capitalist, which I dislike that tag, but AI crusader. Actually, I'm more of a crusader for human beings because we're partnering with AI. We're kind of merging with it in reality much sooner than I think people recognize. So a crusader for the superhuman of the future, because AI augmenting us in a positive way can really create that reality.
Okay. And so as a entrepreneur and venture capitalist, you have that venture capital moniker is not something you're proud of because of the way in which venture capital is seen today as kind of a pirate environment.
I'm not a big fan of being called a venture capitalist because when I say that, the type of venture capital that people think about attached to AI type technologies, most of those popular companies, because of their venture capital approach, high growth, valuations driven by growth as opposed to core value creation, as evidenced by real people paying real money and getting positive outcomes, it just sets up an incentive structure that is part of the reason why we see so much social unrest in those big AI systems. They didn't do it on purpose, but it has happened. And the shareholder incentives that come from high growth venture capital backed tech companies is the problem. Ironically, our venture capital firm is specifically designed to never end up with perverse incentives of that type, just because we have the foresight of the history of what everyone else just did to know how to control for that. But oftentimes when we say we're venture capitalists in tech, people automatically think we're going for unicorns at all cost, at all human cost. And we're like, no. We're going for really solid outcomes, including a whole bunch of humans improving their quality of life like they never thought possible.
And so that's Grayscale Ventures. Is that the name of your
Great Scale?
Great Scale.
Great Scale. We think of it as the power of technology is really about scalability. It's about doing wildly, highly valuable things to millions and millions of people. So all of the companies that we work on intend to take like really transformational elements of quality of life and spread it to millions of people. The type of value that normally you have to like pay a gym trainer or a psychologist or a healthcare professional a lot of money to help you out over time. Technology can really take you to those outcomes and beyond at very high scale. So that's what we called great scale ventures.
Okay. And so giving you some examples of some of the businesses that you developed early and sold off or merged.
Yeah. Well, I cut my teeth in business technology In high school, I was solving a lot of random business problems in the late 90s for people that had car dealerships and banks and real estate investment trusts. And they didn't know what the internet meant to their company. And I was just this Joe Blow kid that was flying their airplanes with them. And I'm a pilot. I've been a pilot since I was a kid. And I'd go help them with software. So it'd be supply chain automation. It would be take reports online, pull them out of the local system and make them available on an intranet type website. And then can we turn that around? And well, why do I have to read the report? Can't I just like it automatically order stuff? And so it ended up in a lot of ERP that I didn't even know that's what that was. So I was 16, 17, 18 at the time.
Enterprise resource planning applications.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I ended up doing, once I graduated high school, I had this large technology infrastructure that looked today like a data warehouse that also was actionable, that had a lot of workflow automation and machine learning elements to it, and then endpoints so that users could just be force-fed work. And by allowing people to just kind of take work next in queue, gave what turned out to be AI an opportunity to change that opinion all the time, right out from underneath large workforces. Plus it was web-based, so it reached across lots of geographic lines. So we founded a generic company that ended up being called Avidine Health, focused on either credit card fraud detection and intervention or healthcare finance. We ended up in healthcare billing and finance. And
so you had a platform and then you found the market.
Yeah, it was a solution looking for a problem. Basically, it was a kind of I called it the rapid application development and deployment environment. It's very exciting. It turned out as this huge enterprise middleware with an emphasis on workflow that modifies itself, with a theory that said, no one should ever have to read a report. The system should just adapt to the statistics in the report. Of course, it had reporting. But in healthcare billing in the United States, that's just a big, huge data integration problem, lots of different legacy systems, plus the health systems were doing a lot of, still are, consolidation at the time. So they just had the most need for a thingy that plugs in many thingies fast, and gives people a window into otherwise totally non-integrated subsystems.
And we're going to dive into that because it's a lot of the folks that are listening to this podcast have questions around how AI is going to be able to help their business processes, whether it's going to be able to help them in their marketing, their B2B companies, marketing like a B2C company, like we get marketed to every day as consumers. How is that going to work? Is it going to be able to change my business? Can it help my product? Can I learn to have a better product? Can we adapt our output of our service and or business via AI? So these are questions that are on the table, and let's dive into them. Let's talk about it now.
Sure.
What's hype versus reality? So I hear a lot of platforms, right? Specific platforms that are purpose built for tools that say that they can plug into your environment and start to make better business decisions around your flow, your workflow. Sure. So they call them business process automation tools, right? And so give me your thought on the industry today and problems or challenges they're in, and where is the real promise?
Yeah. Well, firstly, I'm reading between the lines. Your intuition is correct that the hype elements of the industry come up in lots of different ways. And usually it sounds like plug and play this thing, the AI will figure it out sort of promise. And a lot of them are in different niches, and ours will do everything or one thing or whatever. And of course, all that's not true. The AI is only as smart as the information it's fed. And then on top of that, if you actually want it to be actionable, so one thing, there's two pieces. One is AI saying, I actually know something. I have an opinion. I know that what you're doing now is inefficient, and this other thing would be more efficient. Well, it can't have that opinion if it doesn't have data labels that tell it how to describe efficiency in the first place. So you can't just kind of plug it into random things and go. And the second piece is then, well, so what? I can use AI to give me a statistical report that would then give me business recommendations, and that looks a lot like consulting, but semi-automatic. But then can it turn around and actually change the behavior of the underlying workflows in your systems?
With some approvals, right? I would imagine people want to have some oversight.
Always.
Things like
so
that.
I'll just use a very specific example. So in the healthcare billing process, there's the notion of a patient or an insurance company is not going to pay. And is it okay for us to discount that bill so that they do, or otherwise write it off? And depending on the size of that write-off, it's either going to require a director approval or a VP approval or a CFO approval. And that number might actually shift around a lot depending on where the health system is in terms of their PR relationship with the public. What's the nature of this individual? Are they a VIP or a major donor? Or even just what's the situation with our current bond rating and cash available, and what's this going to do to that?
So the AI would have to have access to all of that information within the enterprise to help make these decisions based on situational analysis, right?
Absolutely. And the most beneficial AI, the kind of the first gen AI that we did in our workflows, which worked across lots of different health systems and lots of different systems. Because the thing is, you can plug in a turnkey AI that says, I know about, let's say, supply chain optimization. But if the underlying, you all know this, you bought these very expensive big systems and they're custom configured. So the model, it has to be mapped to anyway. Anyway, that's just a side point. It's only Gazintas goes out, says it's only as good as what Gazinted. But the thing that was like the first gen optimization was actually around getting the VP to respond. It wasn't it was just a policy decision about, is it at this level? And then maybe it was, let's consider the debt ratio, and that might adjust that a little bit. Okay, so that's not really AI doing that. That's another policy decision. So now there's two pieces of data and two rules. But the AI was really good at going like, this person's not going to respond in a timely manner, and we're about to trip over a timely appeal deadline with this insurance company. I got to really force escalate this thing. I got to go to another communication channel, like one of our agents calls the person and loosens it up for them, or perhaps a text channel, or perhaps a 911 red phone, Slack channel.
An escalation path, right? So a predetermined escalation path, and one that knows and starts to learn different patterns of behavior from folks and time events.
And then there's business process change that you have to agree to. Hey, VP, here's a red phone. We promise it won't be abused. If that red phone rings, it's only important.
Right.
Period.
And so these tools are available today in the market. How do they look like a part of a platform? Are they their own tool that marry in the different platforms that are in play? Because most clients have AI enablement in many different facets, right? Their ERP has it, their CRM has some, their marketing tools have some. So how do you get to this process flow?
Well, and that's where AI is just like employees. Everyone's a specialist. So just because you have, let's say, an AI system that does a really good job of force reprioritizing your drip marketing campaign or optimizing your marketing dollar spend, just because you have AI over there doesn't mean that you have AI that can read your contracts and determine for your next negotiation a better supply contract, a supplier agreement, because it's got some swift, cool knowledge about your utilization curves. So they're all specialized AIs. And just because you have one in an area doesn't mean anything to, quote, do I have AI? Do I have business process automation? So there is no generic thing, mostly. And you can, look, when you look at enterprise integration, like enterprise architecture, and you've got things that hold data in places, and then you have workflow things that move things around. And then you have other things that create new data points, whether that's because they're doing a workflow or because they're asking for input from something, or you're pulling in data from somewhere else. That data footprint, the whole data footprint, becomes your universe. And if you start with the reports that you need to understand whether or not things are good, then you have an endpoint that AI can chew on. The actual AI itself, those are generic. Like if it's NLP, it's whoever's got the better model for that language. If it's a scoring mechanism like a FICO score, it's who's got the better training set of data. And the reality is that you have the best training set of data yourself.
Correct. The
Usually
business
you just
does.
can't liberate it.
Right. That's therein lies the challenge that most of my clients are trying to solve for right there.
Yeah.
They have all of this data. They have it in different repositories. They're spending lots of money to try and coalesce that data in some pool or lake or repository, whatever you want to name it. They're looking to pull all that information into some place that they can then use AI to come into their own data and make some great decisions.
Sure. Yeah. And I think that a lot of times it's really obvious where the next priority is. I think that there's a tendency that I see for people to go, I got it. This is where I really know AI can help. I really know that I can automate this portion of my process. There's a really clear ROI. I'm going to be, and then they kind of wrap a lot around that. They try to, what started with, let me get some niche data insights and maybe engineer a automation underneath the insights, turns into a huge data warehouse implementation and an enterprise data architecture engagement with a big consultant firm. That's sort of a travesty. It's okay to pilot things, it's okay. The state of all of this stuff is that, do I need to, in certain areas, make my own models, my own regressive and analytic models, and hook it in a proprietary way into my workflows? Or is there something I can get off the shelf, whether it's a model or a whole model plus system, like a contact management system or a contact center system has built-in AI that right into it.
Right.
That is just really good at escalations and like listening to people and call quality scoring and stuff like that.
Suggest a response, suggest a document, right?
Yeah. But
start a conversation for a bit and buy some time while it routes to the right person.
Yeah. But the issue with that becomes, though, some of those systems are newer and they're kind of hosted and they're packaged. And it means that you have to re-express all your call escalation rules out of your other systems that have decades of business process embedded in them and quality of service process embedded in them. And you either have to switch all the communications over to that other thing. You're basically writing rules in 2 places or 9 places. That's more risky than saving a little bit of time through AI implementation. So, that's just an example of where you ask where the hype is. I think anyone that builds a system soup to nuts, that system will be more efficient. Unfortunately, their soup to nuts is only like 18% of your problem. And 90% of your problem is then going like, okay, can I carve out a place for that soup to nuts to be very independent? And then what are my outputs that hook it into the other things? Or am I ready to just move a whole bunch of stuff over into that environment? And the industry is not really there yet. And it has a lot to do with the legacy systems that everyone already has. Like you can implement Salesforce, and Salesforce doesn't have really any templating at all. It's a very open database. It's you can make lots of custom objects. There's a whole development. Well, all that means is that you've seen one Salesforce implementation, you've seen one. And that makes it very difficult to combine all these things together. And that's why I think Einstein doesn't necessarily have the outcomes that one might imagine. Whereas if you have a highly templatized CRM system where you don't have a lot of flexibility, this is your process for marketing and to conversion to sales and then follow-up support workflow and ticket management. That's the way it is. what that does is it fixes the labels, and then that way you could train AI across systems. But then, of course, you can't, because none of these enterprise customers want to share their data to train AI that's going to give their competition a slice of the pie. So all of these things taken together mean that the off-the-shelf AI is very nichey, and that's okay. It's really more about, do you have any clarity as to an outcome? And it always is a data collection exercise, a data normalization exercise. Train a model, apply the model, change the workflow around, and leave in your wake more automations. It's more about picking around. And sometimes it's one platform, sometimes it's another, but all of them have enough ROI in each project to justify it.
And I would agree with that. And I think that there's been enough platform adoption and there's enough AI in a lot of those platforms doing the right thing that people need to enable those to do that thing better, right? That it's supposed to do.
And it's okay to experiment.
Right.
It's okay to think of it as a 3-year pilot and risk mitigate it through the domain and scope.
The challenge that is there for most folks is, how do I get the data out of the different places, and where does AI overlap or not overlap, and how can I learn what that algorithm's gaining access to knowledge wise. So, for example, I have the conversation often that NLP engine in my business is going to learn things that I can't even think of today, right? It will start to learn things about my business and my processes and my customers and my product that, are going to be mind blowing if it can do the right thing, right, over time.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts there?
Sometimes that's true and sometimes it's not. And this is where you have to be very deliberate.
And for the listeners, NLP, natural language processing. So.
Yeah. So a lot of AI, when people talk about AI, it's associated with understanding speech and text and doing things with that, either extracting information from it or predicting it or answering as if they're a human. All of those are different forms of NLP applications. There's two completely different things that happen with AI. One is, I don't have a lot of data on this person, and AI seems brilliant and magical about knowing about them. Okay, so that's what a lot of marketing intelligence AI does. And if you have a model associated with, so for instance, if you have an NLP engine and it's listening to a phone call, and you want to understand the sentiment of the phone call and the personality profile of the individual, there are lots of great models for that. That's easy. The only reason it's easy is because someone trained it with a truckload of data that was totally before you, not in your data sphere at all. It just knows that these sets of words and this cadence and that intonation, taking the voice signal and signal processing it and looking at the timing between and the balance of who's talking and what, all of those things train some model somewhere, not on your data, on data that predated you externally that you would never have access to, so that when it's listening to that call, it can say, this has the signature of someone who's getting upset.
Yeah.
So that's magic. That is inherited value. You bought wisdom that you never would have the data to get, period. That's why it's magic. But that's a model. You're not training the AI. The AI is trained. It's just there, and it knows how to read those different inputs and output a tone, like a sentiment, which is completely different than trying to inherit an AI like the ones that I built at Avidyne, where what we were going after is FICO score predictive of, and I didn't build it, our teams built it, but the FICO score, is it predictive of a healthcare debt? And the answer is not really. There's a lot of special data that came from our business process systems that allowed the same boring AI types to get brilliant about healthcare specific collections. Mm-hmm. And it really just came down to many things, but by being able to identify the moment that a debt was agreed to by a customer, not when was the debt incurred, when did they agree 95 days later after the hospital visit, then it started the collection cycle. That's when the person committed to pay, and then they followed normal FICO. So we had to have a proprietary score. Only we had that data, only us. Like, we couldn't get that from anywhere else. So if we would do regressive analysis on our internal data about is someone likely to pay, it was way more predictive than FICO scores for normal credit card debt. So that's just an example of, sometimes it's like, can training a new AI model teach me patterns that I can use from my own data? Or is it that I can buy a model that had access to data I would never have access to and give me those insights as if I did?
And so there lies part of the opportunity is if you can model your own information, your own data that you have, right? Make some of those AI-based decisions, right? Or at least get some AI-given information on my data, right? And then go outside with the same AI to then look at what the world's doing and say, hey, with this information we have together, here's some ideas.
Yeah, so a good example is like human sentiment in spoken words is probably something you want to buy. But let's say that you're, I'll just stick with healthcare. You're a healthcare institution, and there's some jargon words that are triggers. There's like special words that mean something.
Right, and it could be business specific, it could be company specific jargon. It could be acronyms they use internally for their own processes.
Right, and that's where NLP can at least, you can scan for those words and include them, whether that's part of your call quality assurance program or whatnot. But and then once you're kind of manually doing that, you theoretically could go back train an AI to automatically infer what words should be trigger words that you didn't think of. But oftentimes by then you're able to optimize it so much with just kind of logical, common sense ways of applying piecemeal AI implementations that back training and like inventing new words to check out as trigger words is probably not worth the data integration exercise.
Right. These are some of the things that the conversations that we're having with many of my clients right now. So it's very insightful information from your perspective. I'm glad we're having it here. Let's talk about marketing, right? Like, so we all, and you have a TED Talk, and we're going to dive into that around consumer AI and how it's affecting us and how we can play back against it. But let's talk about in the business situation, the business world. There's a lot of AI tools right now around marketing, right? Traditionally, the market was business to consumer based businesses using AI to find new clients, to target advertisements, to use social media feeds and find the demographics or the adjacent type of customer. How about B2B, right? Isn't there a play here in the future with AI where businesses that seek a service or a client that would need their service, isn't there an opportunity here?
There is an opportunity, and there are some companies that are getting there with understanding the B2B cycle better. The consumer buy cycle is characterized by a short decision process, and the reason that it's pretty effective to be predictive and so on is that you're really you can cause a consumer to go from not buying to buying. Right now, they can buy and complete the transaction, close the deal, the money goes in the bank. In a B2B transaction, it's actually way more protracted than that and dynamic. So there are opportunities B2B. There are some models that in specific markets, like in the when is someone ready to buy large amounts of computer equipment market, where you can have your different landing pages out, and there's some AI that looks at people's buying patterns, and then it can back check their IP addresses on, are they kind of related to the same enterprise, and is that indicating that enterprise is sort of teeing up for something, and is now the time to really get your agents to double down on connecting with their relationships and send that back to Salesforce and goose the priority score of those call outreaches or whatever. it's still very black art. I think that there is an opportunity there. It's very domain specific. I think it also requires you to set up all your own sensors. Like it's more about, you can't tell if they're searching other people's stuff. So you got to spread a net to where and do a good job of showing up in the search results for yourself. So I think it's a little bit tougher to do that. I think the best opportunity in B2B is to really do a better job of classifying contacts and what they are for the buy cycle. Are they champions? Are they economic buyers? Are they influencers? Are they actually coaches to the process, or are they detractors? And I think that there's a lot that can be done there, especially in looking at email exchange data, sentiment, the language that gets used, call monitoring between the rep and the person, to where you could figure out pretty easily the disposition of that person and what role they play in the cycle, so that like you can look at an opportunity and say, I don't have a champion. This person sounds nice, but actually they're showing all the indications of someone who's dragging information out of you, and someone else is, because they got a buddy, they're going to send this all to. I don't see anything that does that. That's a very, but to me, that's the opportunity.
There's a million sales guys listening to this right now that are shuddering in that thought process of having AI second guess their sales cycle and whether that's a predictable deal.
Well, that's interesting. You talk about a lot of people being afraid. I don't subscribe to, AI is taking our jobs. It just doesn't work like that. AI makes us superhuman.
If it betters their process, they should adopt, right? And they should
absolutely.
They should look for an opportunity to better the idea. I meant shudder not from the fact that they're going to lose their job, but shudder from now they have AI second guessing their funnel and questioning whether or not that deal is legitimate or not.
Yeah, well, in the example I provided, maybe, salespeople definitely have a whole other personality to them, and that's where if you're going to train a model to do a good job of making the salesperson and the person they're selling to relationship more efficient.
Sure. Yeah.
It's got to be in that domain. It's about those personality interactions.
And there's plenty of AI that's doing that today in the call center. There's and the CRM tools that are pretty deep into that, right? They're going to tell you and predict a sales cycle. I mean, I have a free tool called HubSpot, for example, and HubSpot has some AI decision making in it as far as my funnel and sales process. What I'm talking about is the being able to find better clients, being able to find clients that are more likely to have a fit for my need, right? And I think that there's an opportunity there.
Yeah, I think there is. I think that it still comes down to, are you talking to the right person at the right time?
Yes, I would agree with that.
It's not logo level. It's individual level, and that's the nuance that B2B has that I don't see in the HubSpot algorithms or in any of them. It's not, a lot of those algorithms are saying, this is how everyone generally classifies their sales cycle. Here's the stage E, D, C, B, A, close, and here's the time between them. Here's how many calls and interactions there were, and this one is showing low activity according to the mean, and so I'm going to goose you to go do more. But that it doesn't qualify the actual contact, and that's the nuance. And I haven't seen any serious attack at that, either by research or by collecting the right kind of data together to see what AI comes up with.
Right. I'm optimistic there's going to be some opportunity there. I think that there's for folks that have a niche product or a niche service, right, that there'd be the ability to then go and poll my local community of businesses that are out there and come back with, hey, here's the type of environment and the type of companies that are out there that might be a good fit for
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, you're on the front line here, and just from what I understand and our prior conversations as well, I think you're you're right on the front line of knowing what those probably should be. And you're right to assume that either, there might be some stuff that's off the shelf that someone can apply in their own way and start coming up with some of these insights as another way to plug and play these different kind of utility AI systems inside their existing processes.
Yeah, I think it's different. I also want to touch base with you on the whole consumer AI world, right? Mm-hmm. You have a pretty popular TED Talk out there. Tell us about your thoughts there, and how that's changed, if at all, since the time you launched the TED Talk, or if it's gotten worse.
Yeah, so colloquially, consumer AI being Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and TikTok and all that stuff. When I sold Avidyne and looked at what I was going to do with my future, it felt like it'd be a lot more fun to, instead of kind of obsessing about this obscure business problem in healthcare finance, to see if we could take some of the same tricks and place that into the phone and drive consumers to be happy and have better outcomes in their lives. Mainly because as I looked at Facebook and all of these others, it seemed like people were getting less happy. They were overspending. They were losing the feeling of connection. They were second guessing their own the opinions of themselves.
Polarizing, right? Getting in echo chambers.
Yeah. So that bothered me a lot for our daughter, who's 2 now. And, it sucks to, no matter how great of an experience we can give her, the technology will obliterate her brain at a rate several thousand times greater than I can as a father.
Sure. So kids are getting all of their information today from social media versus legitimate news source or information from their parents.
There's that, and the fact that the current state, the intensity of information flow from those systems is vastly outstrips the teacher's ability to break in, my ability for her to hear me. And the answer is not take away the phone. The answer is not take away the tech. Again, technology is about creating superhumans. So the person with the superhuman power is going to win over the person without it.
Right. We're all cyborgs. We carry a device, but it might as well be implanted in us. Most of the time it's within arm's reach. 90+% of the waking hours of most Americans, they have a smart device in reach.
Yeah. And that's actually a huge opportunity. Aside from the fact that the ship has sailed, we're stuck with it, and it's not good, and it's getting worse. It's only gotten worse. I thought it would get better a couple of years ago, and it didn't. It got worse. It still is true that there's an enormous opportunity in it for us to kind of get through the adolescence, and we pretty much only use technology when it's awesome for us. And it came down to, what does awesome for us mean? How do you measure it? And then how can AI help? And that's the answer. Don't point the AI exclusively at ad conversion.
But that's where the revenue opportunity is today. That's driving the bus, right? That's the whole social dilemma documentary where, the inventors of the Facebook algorithm for monetization of advertising all want to take the genie, put him back in the bottle. And
I don't think that's right, though. All right, here, try this on. If AI is so smart, why is a great conversion rate on an ad 10%?
I don't know.
Should it be 90%?
I don't know. I don't know if 10% is a good number or not.
Well, in digital marketing, it's a fine number.
Right.
Facebook was getting upwards of 35% before GDPR shut down their ability for auto opt-in on additional data labels. But they were getting up there. But even 35% is not 90%, not 100%. If AI is artificial intelligence of like the Matrix, that's crap. That's a horrible conversion rate. The answer to get you 80% conversion rate is to engage the buyer in a two-way transparent conversation in the moment to verify their belief in the value that's going to be created. Because if you do that, you can replace the original ad with the one they will buy.
AI's never asked my opinion. It only asks whether I click or not click, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
So how do you train AI other than not clicking? That you're not interested?
Well, right now, the reason why it got worse over the last 5 years is the cross-pollination of the AI systems. So the data sharing and the insight sharing, largely flowing through Google across all those different systems, is what made it worse. It's also what makes it possible to fight it. So my YouTube recommendation engine is influenced by my Amazon Alexa interactions, and it's influenced by my passive searches on Google, and it's influenced by my clicks and my likes on Facebook. So some of them are direct and some of them are indirect relationships. But the good news is that at this point, the good and the bad news, they're all interrelated. And the most valuable, there are certain behaviors that you do online that algorithms really notice in a big way. Like they change their mind about you because of it.
And what are those, and how can we mold that?
One of them is commenting on YouTube videos with positive sentiment.
Positive comments on YouTube.
Yeah. So if you're watching YouTube videos and you really are celebrating one of them, like, this is a good one, this one I value, not cute, not
superficial, but
not superficial,
genuine.
Wow.
It can read the sentiment, and it will then say, based on that positive sentiment, it will start to train other AI engines around that. This is
there's that, but more specifically, it's going to change your recommendation engine, both in Google, in YouTube and in Google, and even propagate into other systems. It's like, well, you tend to watch stuff about cars, but you commented about the thing about mindfulness. So the act of commenting, and the comment was long and sentimentful, and if you watch the ad, that's an extra one. Like, it's like, holy crap, this person means it. This was different. And it goes around and goes, hey everybody, look at this guy. Market that stuff to him. Market that stuff to him. Market that stuff to him.
Right.
And all of them go nuts. And instead of the follow me marketing crap that you get, where it's like, I just bought that shirt, don't market it again. It really does come after you with similar quality stuff, because all it knows is you showed a huge amount of interest, and I'm going to now pummel the crap out of you with it everywhere I can, because it thinks it's selling to you, and it is. So even just the more eco-responsible brands, as an example, like if you're, or just brands that tend to pay for marketing words that tend towards people that are nicer, like, you just are going to get better stuff.
And so that could help me train AI so that I can get out of the echo chamber, right? My big concern is that I'm in an echo chamber, and I've done the experiment with a very good friend of mine who's on the other side of the fence, politically, if you will. And we pulled up Google and we searched terms, we searched questions, and he had different feeds. Literally the top 3 and 4 feeds he was getting were very different than mine. Yep. And so that tells me the algorithm has me in a box, and it's going to feed me more stuff like that box, right? We've all watched Social Dilemma. We've all watched The Great Hack, I think. If you haven't watched Great Hack, it's another good one on Cambridge Analytica. And what they did with the social engines. At any rate, they feed me information. I want to get out of that bubble. I want to have a more rounded feed. Yeah.
Well, it's tough because the feed, it's easy to consume that feed. So some extra pieces are, well, one, you can influence that feed sort of by these very bright acts of positive affirmation to the systems that's really what you want. And that looks like, don't like anything except for the really, really, really good stuff. And this is the one piece that I think everyone, including me, needs therapy on. If you're looking at something that over validates your polarized view of something, gosh darn it, I was right to, vote for that person. Don't. You do not like anything that you already agree with. only like stuff that changed your mind.
Okay.
That's it. Only.
Because you're validating the feed and it's just going to double down on feeding
Yes.
you more information, right? So
Absolutely.
we have to lesson here, Tyson, and in your TED talk, you talk about it as well, but you're more descript now. We can train AI to serve us better as consumers.
And recognize that every click, and especially the likes, and especially comments, is a training moment. It's not social validation. It's not being nice to your friend. There's too much risk in entering that piece of data. It is a training opportunity.
Wow.
And
that's definitely a different way of looking at it. That's not the way that most people engage. There's political correctness too, and whether you like or don't like certain things, and people will like things that they don't necessarily agree with because they think it's appropriate. There's all kinds of social mores. You could do a whole dissertation or doctorate out of that.
And by the way, the like in particular is a very rough one. It was not intended to be so powerful and so divisive, but it is. And it's not accurate. People don't recognize that the like is actually a direct proxy for how valuable and relevant that information is. When most people do it for superficial reasons, like I'm just being nice to the person or I'm hopping on the bandwagon.
Yes.
But I just wouldn't even touch likes, period, dot, end of story, ever. But make comments. Comments are they're evidence of high energy investment in time. And the other good news is on a lot of these systems, if you didn't like it, but you make a comment, people don't necessarily notice because the people that are on the other side don't even see the comments. But AI sees it, and on top of that, if you use words in there that it's not necessarily I agree with it or anything, I appreciate that you brought up talking about this, that, and the other thing, and use the words that are in the subject. You don't even have to state your own view of it, and you could just use a positive word like appreciate or thank you for, or I see your point of view. All of those are positive sentiment. It'll reinforce the pattern, and all algorithms will notice it.
Oh, that's good information.
Almost all.
That's great. That's great information. And I'm always wondering how to get out of the echo chamber. I don't want to be in one. I want to get rounded information, and that's great advice. Let's talk about something that I heard on one of your other conversations. You talked about nutrition and AI, right?
Yeah.
And so we have some healthcare specific folks here, but more importantly, there's a good amount of listeners here that are we're in the beginning of the year. Everyone's thinking about better ways to eat, right? I don't need to go on a dissertation. Most of my listeners know that, I try and be healthy, and most of the folks that I'm around are in the same ilk. And I believe something that you believe, based on what I heard, and I want to dive into it. Sure. I think that most people have a different metabolic footprint, right? Not all diets are going to work for all people, right? And then we could have a long conversation around that, but you brought that topic up and how AI might be able to help there. Let's talk to me about how nutrition and AI can work together.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the companies that we co-founded at Great Scale Ventures is called Volve.ai, like evolve, but Volve.ai. And the founder is very big into nutrition and fitness, and so learned a lot about that from there. But what we're actually building is a technology that partners with people to allow them to form habits automatically. And a lot of people want to feel better. And
I think most people want to feel better.
Most people want to feel better. So the biggest, in order, the three most transformational things that we see that makes people actually feel better, because at Volve, we look at things like energy level, we look at metabolic indicators, like you can call it BMI, but stuff like that. It's
body mass index.
Yeah. Right? It's hydration first, good hydration. Then it's ingredient replacement in nutrition, sequentially, and sleep. And sleep is actually the most transformational, but if you get hydration and underlying nutrition wrong, your sleep will suck.
Well, so sleep right now has a lot of AI. People are using Aura rings
Yeah,
or
Aura is great for telling you
I
that your
use my
sleep is
Garmin
problematic.
watch, right?
The Aura ring just doesn't turn around and tell you you forgot to drink 18 ounces of water 30 minutes before you went to bed. You forgot to make sure that you didn't consume, that you consumed a small amount of carbohydrate before you went to bed to feed your brain's need for reconstruction. You were deficient on the good fats that are associated with restoration and joint slickness, some other stuff like
Right.
minor. There in today's diet, especially in America, especially AI-driven diets, which means anything on the Amazon recommendation engine.
True.
Is nutritionally deficient in very important ways. And then when you do get the nutrition, the timing is everything. Like it's a small amount of this or that just before bed or after you've woken up or when you're about to work out.
What you're eating as well as when you're eating it, right?
Yeah.
And as opposed to when you last ate, etc. There's a lot going in there. But the big challenge I have, you're talking to a guy who is very thoughtful about this, right?
Yeah.
And I've used the logging apps. So I've used several different ones, MyFitnessPal, Carb Manager, whatever, to input food in there. And it's cumbersome. It takes time. And I lose momentum over a period of time. And I'm a pretty disciplined individual. So when it comes to working out, I'm there. When it comes to eating right, I'm there. But logging is a hassle. What can AI do to solve here? What's technology going to bring me that's going to solve that problem? Or am I going to have an implant in my gut that's going to tell me what I'm eating?
This one we look at backwards. We think that the role of AI is actually to take the knowledge that is known and cause people to use it effectively. So we don't need AI to tell us yet the next level of nutritional wisdom. We know all the next level of nutritional wisdom that people aren't following, that only if they did, it would be better. So AI's job is actually to use digital marketing technology to annoy us into compliance. So
that's really the answer.
But it can't come across as annoying. It comes across as helpful. So I woke up this morning, Valve pinged me, and it said 32 ounces of water in the next 10 minutes. Go.
Okay. So it's your own personal AI tool, though. It's different than a marketing feed in my Instagram.
But it's using marketing techniques. It's using drip messaging campaigns.
I get it.
Properly timed through nudge messaging.
Yes.
With auto dethrottling. At the end of the day, we say, would you have done those things had we not reminded you? And of course I say, of course I would have. And then I don't. So it dethrottles for 2 days-ish. You don't tell it when. It comes back in your life at a moment and it says, by the way, drink some water. And you're like, shit, I forgot. And it says, did you go like, shit, I forgot? Click if you want me to tell you tomorrow. And they're like, yeah.
Okay.
And it takes 30 to 90 days for just that one habit.
You're training your AI buddy to be a better coach.
The AI is the coach. It's training you into one habit at a time, or maybe two, and locking it in so good, like so hardcore locked in, 180 days of confirmed lock-in, so that the next thing you do, the workout or the meditation or changing what you're eating, is on a much better platform.
That's fantastic, because those things are things that everyone's looking to be more regular with, right? And build these habits. Before we go down that path, let's dive back real quick into the nutrition piece. Do you believe that people have different metabolic footprints, and that different diets work for different people?
Absolutely. And I think also that people have different psychological footprints, and it's the two together that are the most important.
So if I were to get into an app and have an app like Valve that would help me build these habits, how would I know what my right nutritional footprint is? What should I be eating and not eating?
So the way that we do it is we power influencers that already have followers that believe them with whatever their habit recommendations are, whatever their nutritional footprint recommendations are. We model that into this AI coach that just kind of drives people into compliance. So by introducing the AI through people that individuals already believe in, kind of automatically fits that customization. Now, sometimes, like keto diets as an example, even the people who push keto diets have throttled back from that. But on Instagram, keto is a very popular word. And if you don't use the word keto a lot, if you don't stay on the keto trend, Instagram de-throttles how many people see your posts. And that directly reduces your personal monetization pathway. So a lot of the influencers, like at South by Southwest, when they were coming together and talking about the Instagram algorithm changes a couple of years ago, were very upset because they're like, look, we have a modification to keto, but if I don't keep on the old talk track, I'm actually going to lose money. So even keto influencers will say, keto's not really right for everyone, or it's not perfect, but you can get started. Now, you as an individual, it's like, hey, I've picked up one thing. It's like, I'm not going to do all keto. I'm not going to go straight Atkins. I'm not going to cut out every carb. What I am going to do is swap out my normal bread for Ezekiel bread for a week and just do that. Just that. Let's think of this as like a 6-month journey of picking off the 15 key things that I'll end up there.
Right.
And then along the way, you're like, oh, and then you can discover alternatives that you like.
I'd like to get to a place where I could have a monitor, right, with some information gathering, whether it be right now it's an expensive blood test and it's a bunch of other data points that I need to gather, and then go to a nutritionist and have a subjective opinion on what would be the right thing to eat. I would love to have I've heard it talked about with the belly biome, like maybe we could have an implant that tells me what type of,
Look, we're going to get there, but we're in the phase of having to collect the data that can actually train that kind of artificial intelligence.
Okay.
So like what we do at Volve is actually outputting a data lake that can teach AI things.
Okay.
So we know for sure the difference in sleep quality when someone does a particular meal item replacement. We know for sure the difference. We're looking at the outcome because we're literally asking the people.
So you're creating a community and having decisions made or recommendations made on that.
And then we're checking in with, did you achieve your intended outcome? Now you have a change agent with an intended outcome and an outcome result. That's perfect for training AI.
Wow.
It may turn out that there's a high correlate. Now, along with it, there's Fitbit data and other data that gets strung along in a temporal index, so that then we're able to later go back and say, was it personality profile? Was it movement? How much of it was correlated to the attainment of that outcome? And then that it turns out that if you have a gut biome sensor and a Fitbit and text messages, bada bing, bada, and you're a woman and you're of this personality type, here are the 3 things that are going to just like blow your world. Like boom, you're going to be good.
Wow.
But we won't know that for like 7 to 8 years.
Right. We need technology to get there. But right now you're building patterns and habits. That's incredible. That in of itself is
specific. And it's specifically architected to output a training set so that AI can actually learn what's going to make a difference. Because if you buy something off the shelf right now, it's not trained. Like maybe it's gut biome, but gut biome may only matter to a few people in reality, like from an outcome perspective.
So this is fascinating conversation here. We could go on for quite a bit. Let's wrap this up with a conversation around your recommendation to the technology individuals that are here. Career pathing, right? What can folks that are in technology today, IT executives, developers, what could those folks be doing to future-proof their careers, knowing that AI is here, it's prevalent, it's coming to stay in different ways? How can they adapt their careers?
Well, for the next 5 to 10 years, it's a data collection exercise in the name of teaching future AI better stuff.
So it's building lakes and repositories and...
Yes and no. That's a part of it. It's more about the career pathing there is empathy with your user journeys. It's really about sticking very, very clearly to where's the value coming from, what are the journeys along the way, and what's creating value in each of your domains. So because from there you can figure out what you need to have better, like, oh, I'm missing these couple data elements. Here's how I'll go about getting them. It might be surveying. It might be by this other model that outputs that data point. It might be a warehouse. It might, depends on your own layouts. But the career pathing is, I really understand the kind of data that we need to collect so that we can then train an AI model that's better than everyone else. I'm going to be the steward of the special, unique data that I know should exist. We're going to go get it. Anyway, it's not, and some people, it may have to be a big data integration thing. Other people may not. It may just be a good job of, off the shelf systems and collecting that information. Because a lot of it requires business process change where your users are actually doing a better job of like classifying things, as an example. Like how you choose what your pick lists are to categorize unstructured data is a really big one. Like if you're lazy or not that thoughtful about what that pick list should be, that's not going to be a pick list that informs AI categorization. If you're like, oh, it's totally fine, the doctors are collecting free text notes, NLP will take care of it. Well, then either go prove that NLP can pull out the key things that you need for billing and outcomes and quality assurance and sentiment, or go and change your processes around a little bit and say, I need to modify that system and that business process to ensure that somebody cleans that data up. I know the doctor's not going to do anything different, but I might add a layer, actually, ironically, where someone classifies that data into a system so that we can do training. And maybe it's only on 5% or 15%, but just this mindset that I'm going to build the environment that will allow today's AI technology to do a better job tomorrow because it's taught by my much better data collection and data footprint. I think that the more that half of your career path is, I'm collecting uniquely high quality data that I know can go to an AI system and learn, that is only going to be high value. You're going to have the right, you're going to be speaking differently. You're going to be talking about value. You're going to be talking about business process and user experience and outcomes, as opposed to this technology or that technology. It's really about outcomes.
What books or videos or things do you think that you would recommend to the folks that are looking to make sure that they're on the cutting edge here?
Yeah, well, you may or may not like the answer, but I think that anyone in the technology space should be very familiar with Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow, which is about the brain architecture of thought process. Every user of technology goes through all of the things, psychological framing and confirmation bias and how they think and do. And it informed, like, that book makes it much easier to do things like, if I'm doing a survey to collect information from someone, is that the right way to ask that question? Am I going to be perverse in my answers or not? It really teaches about how the workers in the workflow are going to be adaptive to change, and about how to sell and influence others into what you're trying to accomplish. So
again, the name of the book and the author?
Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. And you get a lot personally out of it because it's about understanding your own decision biases, but it's about the brain architecture that we all live with, or most of us live with, and how we make, how we're irrational and rational simultaneously, and how to avoid that. But when you're engineering big systems, especially business systems, every single user has that going on. And the way that you create value is by getting people to not think and do the best thing. That's the power of technology that these people, that your listeners, wield. You don't have to think anymore to do the best thing. That's going to make everything better. So that book's really good. I think I don't have a lot others off the top of my head that aren't science fiction books. Most of my design and enterprise architecture inspiration comes from science fiction, from space operas.
Yeah, but most science fiction that we're all used to, the old classics like Jules Verne and things of that nature, they've all come true. So
yeah,
they've literally all come true. We have the Jetson communicator tool in our hand every day, right? And when in the 1970s, when I was a young kid watching the Jetsons, they had a magic piece of glass in their hand where they could ask a question and get an answer. And I have that now. And that just is mind blowing to me. Not to my kids. They grew up with it, so they don't know any different. Right. But to me, watching the Jetsons, that was something that was there. Now all we need is a space pack. Now, if somebody can get a legitimate rocket pack and I can move around that way, that would be awesome.
Elon's probably on it, right?
Yeah, he's working on it. Tyson, I appreciate the time here. This has been very insightful. I look forward to following you and the company and future companies that you're working on, and appreciate the time. We're very topical information that we're gathering here around AI. And last thoughts?
Last thought, Mike, I really appreciate you being out there on the front line. The reality is that people in a position in medium and large businesses, embedding AI is the front line. The AI that's out there in consumer land gets away with a lot of crap. And inside of businesses, that's not the case. The incentives are for it to work and be effective and not for it to hurt people.
Yes.
And so the innovation over the next 10 years that your listeners and you are leading is critical. It can sound like it literally is the front line.
Yeah. I appreciate it. Thank you very much, Tyson.
All right. See ya.
Hey, Mike here. Hope you liked this boardroom session. Please check back to your future sessions as we're recording a new one every month. If you want to reach out, look for me on LinkedIn or send me a note at mike@sidepath.com. That's Mike at sidepath.com.